am an assistant professor in the speech communication department here at Oregon State.
My name is Andrew Gundlach. I'm a second year grad student getting my master's in interdisciplinary studies, focusing on rhetoric, interpersonal communication, and ethics.
My name's Madison Parker. I'm a graduate student getting my master's of interdisciplinary studies in rhetoric, interpersonal communication, and sociology.
Hi, my name is Will Ader, and I am a master's student here at Oregon State studying rhetoric, interpersonal communication, and adult higher education.
Well, I want you to think for a moment about somebody that you think of as a really good leader. It might be somebody you know personally or a public figure, regardless of who it is. I'm sure that person has great communication skills, which isn't too big of a surprise. There certainly are an abundance of sources available that can teach us how to become a good leader, and usually communication is at the top of those lists of things, which isn't surprising at all. What I find somewhat problematic about some of those sources and things that will teach you how to be a good leader is that they tend to focus on the delivery of a message and how you can try to get your point across and effectively transmit a piece of communication to somebody else. But as a professor of organizational communication, what I teach my students is about workplace dynamics, a topic that's very intricately tied to the connection between leadership and communication. And it's true that a manager needs to be able to effectively transmit ideas and expectations, tasks, and whatnot to their employees, but it's certainly not enough to be a really good leader of people within the workplace or any other type of organization. So the way that I see it, a leader really connects with people. A leader is somebody who inspires us. And there isn't necessarily a formula for how to do this. I would argue that there are multiple ways to be a great leader. There are multiple types of good or effective leaders. And it certainly does lie within communication. Communication is something that all of us do, and we don't always think very clearly about how we're doing it or what effect we're having on other people when we're communicating. So that's one of the things I love about studying it, is that we can really become more aware of our own communication processes, how that's connected to our ability to be a good leader, and how that really translates to our interactions with other people. I would say that being a good leader is really requires being attuned to both the verbal and nonverbal aspects of communication, which certainly is going to require a level of self-awareness. It requires empathy. It definitely requires the ability to adapt to different people and different situations, rather than having just one style of communication that you use in any context or any situation. That ability to recognize in yourself your own strengths and weaknesses, how you come across to other people, and how people react to you, how to change and be able to adapt to different situations is really important, because it really enhances our ability to empathize with others and see situations from other people's perspectives. And when we talk about organizations, the traditional models of organizing really focused on the voice of management and really encourage managers to keep an interpersonal distance from their employees, which meant that communication was very one-way, very task-oriented, and really not focused on leadership qualities in terms of developing interpersonal relationships. Luckily, the more recent models of organizing have really shifted toward a more interactive, two-way approach to communication, which does allow people in supervisory and subordinate relationships in organizations to develop more of an interpersonal connection, which I think really enhances the potential for leadership, because there is feedback going both directions. And somebody who's a great leader recognizes that just about anybody who is a part of a group or an organization has good ideas that everybody can contribute. So it's not just the person who is legitimately put in charge because of their position as a supervisor, but they recognize that people at all levels have great ideas to contribute. And I would say that really good leaders use communication to establish trust with their followers, and it's not just about the leader, him or herself, and the position that they're in, but being able to really connect with people to establish that trust that allows everyone to open up and communicate in a clear way. And I think one of my favorite concepts that I teach in classes and that we discuss in organizational communication is this principle of equifinality, which is something that I love because it's really relevant to everything and certainly to leadership. And basically what it means is just that there's multiple paths to the same end result. So for me, when thinking about leadership, that just means that there's not necessarily one great way to lead or one formula to follow in how we communicate with others that's going to make us a good leader, but that we need to be just open to different ideas, willingness to adapt to a variety of situations, and that willingness to allow for multiple opportunities is what's going to allow the development of strong interpersonal relationships that allows for good leader follower type of relationships, and that we shouldn't always communicate the same in every situation, but have that ability to just adapt. So what I'd rather do than just talk the whole time is turn it over to a more interactive discussion with some of my students here and focus on communication and leadership within the context of organizations. And we can just start to discuss now a little bit. And I think to start the conversation off, what I would like to hear from you are just some of your thoughts regarding the differences between somebody who's a manager and somebody who's a leader. Because I would argue that that's not necessarily the same thing. So to start us off.
There you go.
Go ahead, Will.
I think that the difference between managing and leading is that kind of the managers are just dealing with what they have in front of them, and leaders kind of go above and beyond that. But also, when you lead, you have to manage, and good managers also lead.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think to have both of them is the best combination, or aspects of both. It's the best for a supervisor.
Sure, absolutely.
I think you kind of certainly alluded to it at the beginning, discussing of communication as a one-way model. And when I think of someone managing a group, I think of someone external from the group who's looking in and directing, this is how things are going to go. And it's just this one way of, I've got these ideas and I'm pouring them into here and I'm making this group do something.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a leadership position is much more included. While there is obviously a hierarchy in management, the leader is involved, in the pits with the crew or with the group, directing, giving feedback, receiving feedback from the group as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a communication is going and it's coming. It's not even linear. It could be coming from various angles. Upper management, lower management, even secretaries that have insight.
Mm-hmm.
The leader is cognizant of all these ideas, and he's in there with the group, or he or she is in there with the group. And just involved, leading by example. They're showing this is what needs to happen, and then they are demonstrating what that looks like when that's happening. And so I just see a leader as much more involved in the group and in the communication process, rather than just out here directing into the group, which I see as just a management position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. What do you think, Madison?
I mean, I think I feel really similar to that. I guess for me, just the traditional idea of a manager is still somebody who's just really focused on that end of the day goal and being productive in the eyes of that company or organization and what they need to get done. But there are a lot of ways that a manager and a leader can really be the same, like what Andrew and Will have also said. But I think for me, it's I see a leader as somebody who's able to open up communication enough that other leaders are able to rise as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even just with my own personal experience with teaching, I feel like when the best class experiences that you have, similar to in an organization when you're working with other people, are the ones where you're able to open it up enough and have those interpersonal relationships that are able to support other people to really come to and rise to their strengths, so that if you're doing different groups or have different tasks you're trying to accomplish, those people feel supported enough to be able to be leaders in their own roles as well. And management can be the same, where you are still might have that hierarchy and people who are technically working under you, but really I think that a good leader means supporting people and bringing them in whatever environment they need to be the most successful. And I think taking that into consideration is what makes a good leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Big thing with that is control versus trust.
Mm-hmm.
With managers, like Andrew was saying, control, they kind of see the environment and they want to do move their own chess pieces as a manager, and then as a leader you trust that your chess pieces are going to do what they should do and win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that you were alluding great when you were talking about leaders being able to have room and support to raise up other leadership, and I was kind of thinking the same thing that we go through in our Com 111 department with Dr. Bushnell, who for the first 7 weeks she teaches all mass lecture, and then during that time we are engaged in mass lecture as tools and aids for her. But in the last 3 courses, we as grad students teach the mass lectures ourselves. And I feel like that's kind of the thing where she is leading by by example. She's showing this is what it's looking like, but she's also saying I also trust you in that to put 500 students minds into your hands, and I want to see you exercise these same traits that I have led and I have just demonstrated. And so right when you said raise up other leaders, that's kind of the first thing I thought of is that we get that example being in the comm department where we're going to teach mass lecture after having spent several weeks watching Dr. Vishno lead the manner in doing it and communicating effectively, and we learn from that and we see that demonstrated, and then we get to step into that role as well and hopefully obviously succeed and not sink, but
Well, and I think that's why, like when Dr. Gallagher was talking about how management strategies have changed, you see that managers now, it's better if they want to have a good environment for people who want to come to work. Like you actually are more productive in every single capacity of your organization when people really want to come to work and they enjoy being at work and they have those interpersonal relationships. And so I think even just in organizations, like really trying to promote that is going to help on every single level. And that's why being a good leader as a manager is so important.
What communication skills do you think are exemplified by good leaders?
I think it's the creating, I don't know if it's a specific skill set, rather than creating an atmosphere where communication is, you feel free to communicate, to engage in ideas. I feel like, if you have a successful, leadership team and, you're being led by that, you have an environment where you feel free to speak up. There could be very timid people in the subordinate role who may have great insight, but they're a little afraid to step forward. And I think a successful leader would have created an environment through being exposing themselves, being vulnerable themselves by sharing and self-disclosing, that we open up the doorway. When we see leaders self-disclose and share insight, that we as individuals being led or subordinates in organizations. We can see that and we'll feed off of that and then be willing to share insight that makes us vulnerable, that potentially puts us at risk. And so I think it's really critical to create an atmosphere where individuals just feel allowed to speak up.
I think a big part of that is the leader being accountable for their own actions and admitting when they're wrong and asking for help and kind of having that humility and when you're leading, say, this is a little over my head, I'm not such a expert in this field, can you help me because I know you're my IT guy or something like that, and then just reaching out to whoever you need to help the greater cause for the organization.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a certain amount of responsibility that goes along with being a good leader to recognize, like I said earlier, your own strengths and weaknesses, regardless of whether that's communication skills or sort of task-specific kinds of things, and then being able to recognize in your staff or people that you're working with who might be better able to fill particular roles or shoes within an organization. That's good.
Yeah, and again, I think it goes to the interpersonal relationships that you have, because I think that really helps a leader to know what kind of communication and what kind of managerial tactics they need to take with an employee as well. Just knowing if somebody needs, like, how people are motivated is key. Like, I have a very different motivational style than some other people that I've worked with. So if somebody is really hard on me, I'm going to shut down. I'm going to feel like you think I can't do this, and that does not motivate me to show you that I can do better, which does work for a lot of people, but for me, that's not it. So knowing how your employees work and having those ways to kind of work with them. Even if they're going through something personal and there's a way that you can support them, just like giving people the space when they need space and being there more for them when they need that, and lending a hand when they need a hand, and motivating them, or even being disappointed in them, like knowing when those are appropriate times to do that comes from those interpersonal relationships. And I think that's how you can get like a really good function within an organization.
That comes from teaching too, and knowing the learning styles of the students that you have, and when to push them and when to say, okay, we all need to get back together and just relearn this because maybe something went wrong.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean bending over backwards. I mean, sometimes what you have to teach people or work with people is to learn boundaries, and that things can't always just go with the flow. Like sometimes there is a hard deadline, and there are going to be consequences if people don't meet them, and that can be really hard. But being able to have that relationship and rapport there to be able to get over that and still work together, I think, is also really important.
Do you think there's a certain amount of prevention that can be like how can communication be used in a more preventive way? Because what we're talking about seems more corrective, right? So if we're educated in terms of communication, how that functions in the workplace, what can we think about maybe that's more preventative in nature?
And proactive instead of reactive.
Yeah.
I think just always discussing, every team meeting or every time, have various methods to submit not as much criticisms, but ideas, feedback, various ways that people can speak up. And I think you're striking on that, dealing with ways that people can be heard, and not just here's a slip that you can sign and submit, but to actually feel within yourself that when you say something or when you write something, it is having an effect. It's being considered, and so always having that on the forefront where people are able to feel welcome and feel heard, and also always realigning our discussions with our end goal. Like always considering, hey, what's your end goal for your participation in this group? What's your end goal for the participation in this group? And really discussing openly. Let's all get out there and verbally say, like, what is our goals and our intentions right now? And if there seem to be some discrepancies, being able to air those and openly discuss them and say, well, your goal is kind of this and your goal is kind of that. Do those coincide or do they conflict? And which one should reign supreme for this group? And let's have other group insight to assess these. I think that would really just build, kind of is that homogenous? Is that the word I'm looking for? Aim, a homogenous aim.
I think for me, it's also like having that relationship with people where you know what's going on in their life too, and so you're engaged in talking to them. So then they're able to come to you and address other issues that they might have. So like how's your dog doing? Is your daughter like your new kindergarten teacher? How's your dad doing if he was sick? Like knowing those things about people is going to make them feel cared about, which is going to let them feel appreciated and also involved. And I think that helps create that cohesion that stops other sorts of cliques from happening, because people seek out that comfort other places if they're not getting it from the core of the organization.
And I think it's up to the leader or the manager to provide time for that to happen. I mean, not just force it, like, hey, we're going to talk about our feelings and sit around the campfire, but just provide a free hour, free half hour of non-work time where everybody hangs out by the
Water cooler.
Yeah.
So that brings up an interesting question of, is there times or is there states where we were discussing how leadership should be so involved and so active in the lives of the subordinates and having this mutual communication thing, but it's always I wonder, is there a line where you're too friendly, and how do you risk losing, because at the end of the day a leader does have a different position than those who are being led, and is there a line when you can become kind of too friendly that you're no longer recognized as the leader and in that position that he or she may be in?
Great question.
Lose your credibility.
Right.
Well, and I think knowing those things also can help you walk that line. Like if you understand that maybe somebody just went through a breakup and they're not able to be productive today, just say, look, like we can have a serious conversation about this. Right now probably isn't the place for you to like have this happen right now. So if you need to go home, let me know, because obviously like you're not here. And so I think setting those boundaries of like, you still know that this is about work, and being able to go, I mean, sometimes you just have to say, I'm sorry, but you're going to need to get your act together if you're going to be here. Otherwise, we're going to need to have a different conversation. If there's any way I can support you, let me know. But right now, like, this is where we have to be at. And so I think when you do know those things and are able to be involved in their life on some level, I mean, obviously you can't force people. Some people just aren't going to be high disclosure people, and that's totally fine. But knowing that about people, and being able, again, to set those boundaries, I think is what's going to help make that a positive experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
I concur.
How does communication relate to things like creativity and innovation in the workplace?
I think going back to providing a space for that to happen, like with what a lot of the hipper companies are doing with providing like an hour at the end of the week to go work on something not work related, and then they come back and are all super energized during their meeting and say, hey, I just worked on this, I found this out. Having creative time and space to do that.
Yeah, I definitely think that's it, kind of what we've been discussing this whole time is just having that field of open communication. You know, a leader can effectively create an atmosphere through not only demonstrating these traits, but encouraging others to demonstrate them, just a feeling of welcomeness and that your insight and that your ideas are provocative and they encourage new growth. Yes, some ideas are going to suck, and yes, some ideas are going to be better, but to still have that feeling that, you know what, this may be a good idea and I want to present it, and that you have an atmosphere that's been created through leadership that says, you have an idea, let's bring it forward, let's discuss it and see what can come of it.
Well, and I think when you take those two things together too, when you have new experiences and you're kind of trying to mix things up as makes sense within that organization, I mean, it's the cool thing about humans is there are different things that change all the time. Like maybe a certain day of the week after this awesome meal I had, I'm feeling great, and then Andrew and I got paired together and figured out that like when we work together, we just have these crazy creative sessions or whatever, and then maybe a month later somebody else that's happening, or you know, whatever. Like I think that there are just like a lot of ways where you can mix things up and support people in a way that helps them to find their skills or create new skills or just find things that they're passionate about, and I think that's where you're able to get a lot of different creative aspects of. And when you have that team cohesion, they're able to support each other too, and that kind of gets the ball rolling and people get excited. And it's really fun.
It kind of reminds me of playing like all the first icebreaker activities you do in your class. Like you have to go play bingo with all of these different, who has a sister, who's been to another country. If those things seem super elementary, but they end up being, they establish those connections. Oh, I have a sister too. What's your sister's name? Where did you go to school? That kind of thing.
And even if everyone in the room thinks it was the stupidest thing ever, they have that in common now, and it always works. Like, make fun of the icebreaker as much as you want. Like, even as a teacher, I'm like, now we're going to play the name game, which I know you all wanted. And I'm super sarcastic, because nobody likes to do that. But at the end of the day, we all did that together, and it was kind of more interesting than everyone let on, but also we went through it together.
Group suffering.
Yep.
Builds unity. That's a quote from somewhere.
All right. Well, why don't we maybe start to wrap it up a little bit and just think about, like, within the context of communication as people who are studying this and becoming very adept at what it looks like, particularly in the workplace, what recommendations would you all have for anybody who's interested in maybe improving their leadership skills or thinking about how to be an effective member of an organization after graduation?
I'd say always be listening. I think people get caught up too much in wanting to voice their own opinions in the kind of meetings that we're talking about, but if you just sit back and listen to what other people are doing, I think you can reevaluate your own ideas and kind of pitch them a certain way or understand where other people are coming from rather than when they're talking, thinking about what you're going to say next.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice.
I think it's, always important to consider that your individual is never done learning. As much as I felt, after a year and a half working at my first job, hey, I kind of got this down or whatever. I go to college and take my first courses, and I'm like, well, I got more to learn about how to, work with this organization. And I think, even now in grad school, I'm continuing it, and I'm sure you can attest to it now, after having gotten your Ph.D., now you're tenure track professor. There's still a goal of pursuing more knowledge and getting more learning, and so we've never reached it. It's always a desire, and as long as you maintain that desire to reach out, I'm going to ask people that are further along in an organization. I'm going to ask, even your parents. I'm going to ask, those are older than me that have been in the game longer. Like, what are some tips? How have you seen things being successfully done? How have you seen things, not so successful? And just always be willing to acknowledge you don't have the final answer, and someone else may have some better insight. And as much as, our pride wants to rise up in us and say, I figured it out. This is the way. I'm speaking directly to myself. I get that all the way all the time. I get that way all the time. We just need to sit back and say, someone else can probably have some greater insight that's going to take us to another level. If like Will said, we sit back and listen and are willing to acknowledge that we need to learn all the time.
Yeah, and maybe your great ideas paired with somebody else's great ideas make an even better idea, right? And we only figure that out through that collaboration and open communication. What do you think, Madison?
Well, I think I've said a lot about being able to understand and know the needs of others. So I think that that's super critical. But I think what I would say, and it's probably not very textbooky, but I think do whatever you need to do or find whatever you need to find that inspires you, because the greatest leaders are the ones who are like just really excited about life.
Absolutely.
And it's so contagious, like especially in an organization. I think that that's what really helps it take off. Like taking one of Dr. Gallagher's classes, like she loves teaching organizational communication like so much, and it makes her classes so fun. And I think everyone else kind of feeds off of that. So do whatever you need to do to be that person for other people and like get them excited. Yeah.
And if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah, I think especially in our lives that can get so routine sometimes, trying to maintain that level of inspiration is really Right. Any final words, comments?
Go Beavs.
Go Beavs.
Go Beavs.
Go Beavs. All right. Thanks everybody for your valuable insights. Go Beavs. Okay.
We'll listen.
Okay. Hi, my name is Erin Gallagher, and I am an assistant professor in the speech communication department here at Oregon State, and I'm from Pullman, Washington. Got out of there after high school, studied undergraduate in Kentucky, and then went back to Pullman to Washington State University for my master's and Ph.D. And now I enjoy teaching and doing research about organizational communication. Go Beavs.
Awesome. Although you said we were a department, we don't have departments anymore.
I know, I thought that after I said
School of Arts and Communication.
that. Really.
Okay.
Just
Listen up
that,
your time.
just do that. That's his introduction.
So
See, this is all weird now. That's all me.
You're wasting their time.
Wait for it. Wait for it. My name is Andrew Gundlach. I'm a second-year grad student getting my master's in interdisciplinary studies, focusing on rhetoric, interpersonal communication, and ethics. Discussing here organizational communication. Done a lot of that in my undergrad and graduate program under Dr. Gallagher, and really enjoy learning. You can't stress that enough, that we're never done learning, and we should always continue to be motivated to learn something new each day. Camera 1, camera 2, camera 1. Camera 1, camera 2, camera 1, camera 2.
My name's Madison Parker. I'm a graduate student getting my master's of interdisciplinary studies in rhetoric, interpersonal communication, and sociology, and I really enjoy listening to Beyonce's new album.
Who mixers?
Miley Cyrus.
I think what's my interesting fact gonna be?
Bow ties are cool.
There you go. But I'm not wearing one.
I know, sucks to say.
Could have been your hypocrite.
Out of the door. Hi, my name is Will Ader, and I am a master's student here at Oregon State, studying rhetoric, interpersonal communication, and adult higher education, and I love bow ties.
Swag.
You're
Should've
gonna look
finished with
so
that.
cool now in your whole learning.
Yeah, yours was way better than the rest
I
of
don't know where
ours.
that came from. I just was like, I was at a standstill, and I was like, how do I just
gotta keep
end
saying
this?
something.
And I just,
Before you did yours, I was like, I